Good day. Today is Friday, May the 3rd, 2024. This is Coach Paula, your life transitions coach, and I'm here today with our May Lunch and Learn series. This month, we are focusing on motherhood. It is Mother's Day this month, and our Lunch and Learn for today is entitled Motherhood Unveiled, Nurture as a Catalyst for Transformation. Nurture as a catalyst for transformation. So let's jump into this on today. First, let's talk about who is Coach Paula. Everyone doesn't know who I am, and so let me introduce myself briefly to those who may not know. I'm a mom. I have 3 young men as my sons. I have a daughter-in-law and a 5-year-old grandson. I'm a certified life transitions coach. I'm also a visionary author. I've written many books. I'm a transformational speaker. So hopefully something I say today will shift your energy and awaken your potential and catapult you into a transformative lifestyle. I'm a singer. I'm a lover of all things seafood, except maybe oysters. And my life mantra is that I am a person of value who values others and adds values to them. So hopefully something I say today will shift your energy, awaken your potential, and add value to your life. We have some learning objectives for today as we explore nurture as a catalyst for transformation. And our objectives are to explore and identify the key attributes of motherhood as a function of nurture, to engage in self-reflection regarding our personal experiences with motherhood, and lastly, challenge ourselves as it relates to the function of motherhood that we receive and that we express in our lives. So let's jump into this. First, let's clarify and level set when we say motherhood, what exactly do I mean? So by motherhood, I'm referring to the function of motherhood. It isn't just about giving birth, because you can be a mom, you can be a mother and function in motherhood without physically giving birth. And I want to make that key point that motherhood isn't just about giving birth. It is the inherent instinct to love unconditionally, to care for, and to protect at all costs, to nurture, and to watch that little child grow and blossom. Then to enjoy the unexplained joy that comes along with it. And so we may be experiencing motherhood as an auntie, as a cousin, as a mother, a birthing mother, as a grandmother. However, the function of motherhood is tied to this inherent instinct to love, care, protect, and nurture. And the one thing I want to focus in on is nurture as the catalyst. And so what exactly do I mean by nurture? Nurture is the process of caring for and encouraging the growth and development of another. And so we're focusing on motherhood, but nurture, men can be nurturers also. I don't want to exclude the men in this process, but for the month of May, I'm focusing specifically on motherhood. And so the process of nurturing is caring for, encouraging the growth and development of another. This may come in the form of a mentor. This may come in the form of a trusted friend or advisor. We can all nurture. So that learning objective number 3, where we're challenging ourselves to operate in the function of motherhood, both in what we receive from others and what we extend to others. Let's receive nurturing from others. Be open toward others to receive nurturing and give nurturing to someone else. Care about someone's growth and their development. Encourage someone in their growth and their development. And so if you know Coach Paula, if you followed any of my social media posts and things, I really am big on acronyms. And so I'd like to level set on an acronym as it relates to nurture. So nurture, and that's going to be the crux of our lesson today. Nurture, nourishing unconditional relationships, tenacity, understanding, resilience, and empathy. And that theme will go through the rest of our presentation. So what is nurture? Let's look at the nourishing. The N is for nourishing. Nourishing unconditional relationships, tenacity, understanding, resilience, and empathy. So when you're nourishing something, if you think about that, we're creating or having substance that are necessary for growth, for health, and for good condition. So if we're nourishing someone, we're giving them sustenance. We're contributing to their life, to their overall health. And of course, the most natural example of this is a nursing mom. And so, as moms are nursing their children, they're providing the necessary sustenance for them to grow, for them to be healthy, and to have a good condition. They say breast milk is the best milk. And so, if a mom is able to nurse that child, they are giving them the best available milk that they can have. That is nourishing. That's part of the nurture process. Now, all of us do not nurse. Some women may. I was unsuccessful with some of my sons in nursing with them, and I had to supplement with formula, but I still nourish them in other ways. So the nourishment as far as food and sustenance is one example, but we can create also nourishing environments for our children, nourishing environments in our home. We can be a safe space and a safe haven for people. That creates nourishment in a sense. It's not physical food, but it's environmental and creates an atmosphere that is necessary for growth, for health, and for good condition. And so the N in nurture is nourishing. What are you doing in your relationships with others to provide nourishment for them? How are you receiving nourishment from others? Are there others that are pouring into you? We can't just only pour out. There needs to be others that are pouring into us as well so that we can be replenished, so that we can be nourished, so that we can be strengthened. And so think about this in your relationships with others. Think about this in how you're interacting with others, and think about it, from a motherhood perspective. Think about your mom or those women in your life that have represented motherhood for you. How have they created nourishing environments? How have you, as a mother, created a nourishing environment for your children? Things to ponder, things to think about, things to do. You in nurture is unconditional. Remember, we're nourishing, unconditional relationships, tenacity, understanding, resilience, and empathy. So the unconditional simply means that it's void of conditions or limits. Salute. It's unqualified. Like there's nothing that you have to do to be qualified to receive this love, to receive this nurture, to receive this support that I have for you. And of course, the highest example that I can express for this is, God Himself giving His only begotten Son, Jesus, to die for us on the cross. Hopefully that's a faith that you believe in and we share that same faith. If not, hopefully you can understand the analogy that I'm giving here. John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever," there's no qualification, it's just whosoever believeth on Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. That was completely unconditional love. There were no limits, no conditions. It was absolute. We were completely unqualified. The Bible says we were born in sin and shaped in iniquity. We didn't even deserve to be rescued. We didn't even deserve to have this gift given to us in the way it was. God unconditionally loves us. And we, in turn, have to be unconditional with our love and with our expression of nurture to others. It can't be, oh, if this, then I'll. No, we're just going to simply do without conditions, without limits. So the things to ponder here is, how are you doing that in your relationships? Are your relationships more conditional or are they unconditional? How are you expressing nurture and love to others? Are there conditions tied to it or conditions associated with it? Okay, yes, you know how they say, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Well, that's conditional. We want unconditional. We want to be void of conditions and be absolute in our love, be absolute in our nurturing, and not put qualifications or qualifiers on a person that they have to walk a certain line or do a certain thing in order to receive from us. The you is unconditional. Think about that in your relationships. Think about your mom or your grandmother or other instances where you've experienced unconditional love. How did that make you feel? How can you extend that same thing to others? The R in nurture is relationship. Relationship is the way in which people are connected and how we behave toward each other, right? We have various relationships. There's husband, wife, there's parent, child, there's sibling relationship, there's employer, employee, boss, employee. I mean, we have a myriad of different relationships. And at the end of the day, the nurturing component of this comes in the way that we are connected and how we behave towards each other. Are we uplifting toward each other, or are we tearing each other down? What are we doing in our relationship? Relationship within the root word has the word relation, or to relate. So how are we relating to one another? Is there understanding there? Is there patience there? The blog that I write monthly is based on the fruit of the spirit: love, joy, peace, suffering, gentleness, kindness, goodness. I mean, self-control. Like, are we relating to others in a loving and a meaningful way? It's part of nurture. That's that relationship we need to look at. We need to evaluate. First book I published as an independent author, my first solo book, is entitled Intentional Intimacy. Intentional intimacy, lessons in life, love, and relationships. I wrote that book as a memoir of my husband and our 30-year marriage before he passed away. And I learned so much about relationships in my marriage with him. Yes, I came from a full nuclear family, and I learned so much with my mom and my dad and my siblings, but I learned so much more in that marital relationship as well. It was like a both and. It wasn't an either or. It was definitely a both and situation. And my husband added so much value to my life in teaching me about relationships. He was very kind. He was very thoughtful, and things that weren't necessarily inherent in me, I had to learn. And you got to think about it. Some things are nature and some things are nurture. So some things are inherently in us at birth. That's just your natural tendency. And other things come through nurture, through our learning of our environment, through circumstances and situations. And so for me, a lot of my caring attributes, not that I was uncaring completely, but caring at the level that my husband did and experiencing his level of care and concern for others raised my level of concern and care for others, because he and I were in relationship together. And so it's very important, the relationships that you have. You want to make certain that there's reciprocity there. You don't want to always be in a relationship where you're constantly pouring out and there's nothing being poured back in. Now, granted, there are instances in some relationships where we are more of the heavy pourer. We may be the mentor, or we may be, the coach, or we may be the person who has to pour in. That's great. But there has to be something that forms and connects that relationship together. And we have to make sure that those roles and that those responsibilities are very clear, so that there's no misunderstanding, so that there's no mistake. And so when we think about this in the context of motherhood, we have a relationship, a mother-child relationship. Well, in that relationship, yes, the parent has more of a pouring responsibility. The child also has a reciprocal responsibility to honor and to respect the parent, and to obey and listen to what they say, and equivalently, the parent, the mother or father, whomever is nurturing, is also listening as well. One of the biggest things I think that it was a crux and a really big component of one of my coaching programs that I've gone through is that everyone is your teacher. Excuse me. Everyone is your teacher, right? That everyone you encounter. So I've learned so much in raising my 3 sons. They're all different. They truly are, but yet they have some commonalities that flow through them as well. But I've learned so much from them as a parent and as a nurturing mother, as a mom, as a nurturer. We have to realize that it can't just always be my way or the highway. Even the Bible tells us to come and let us reason together. So I like to listen to my children. I like to hear their perspectives, and some of their perspectives help to shape my perspective as well. However, at the end of the day, as the parent, I have the responsibility to make the final decision. But there have been many, many times where I've had to listen to what my children had to say. And what they said, quite honestly, was something I needed to hear. And I needed to incorporate their perspectives because it's in a relationship. It's not just one sided. And so at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we are doing the best to be connected and monitoring as best we can how we behave and act towards one another. Next component of nurture is T, tenacity. And so when we think about tenacity, this is the quality of being firm, determined, and or persistent. We've got to have that tenacity about us. And moms, motherhood, we got that tenacity. Yes, we do. It's important that we have to be firm, we have to be determined, and we have to be persistent. There's a lot of hats and a lot of roles and responsibilities that we have as it relates to motherhood. And so we have to be firm, especially when you're raising boys. I had 3 sons, and my husband, his voice was very deep, and he could say something to the kids, and it was almost like that Mufasa, they get shuddering and all. And I would have to kind of be really firm because they didn't always necessarily think that, okay, I didn't have that Mufasa shuddering type of voice, but they knew if my lip got really pencil thin and I kind of, they knew I wasn't playing. I didn't necessarily have to use the hand. There, I had to use it sometimes, but if I could change my tonality and the of my voice and make a more of a firm stance, executing that tenacity, I got my boys' attention when I did that. And so part of nurturing is having that firm resolution, being determined in what we are doing, and being persistent ultimately to get to where we want to be. And so that's a key foundational component of nurture, is this tenacity, having this fortitude, having this ability to be firm, to be stable, right? To be determined in what it is that you're doing. So ultimately, you can raise, mature, and impact that child, the adult child, the teenager, the infant, to be able to nurture and bring them into the growth that they need to experience. Next is you, understanding, right? Understanding is the quality of having good insight and judgment. Very important. It requires comprehension, some tolerance, and forgiveness. How can 2 walk together unless they be agreed, right? We have to have some understanding. That means that we're standing under something. We're standing under some kind of common ground. We're standing under something that we both believe in, something that we both agree on. And we don't always have to agree. Let me just say that. Sometimes we can agree to disagree. There can be different perspectives that we have, but we have a mutual understanding. And this is the foundation of communication. Too often, most of us communicate and listen to respond, as opposed to listening and then to answer with something that is just not, something that's thought out. We have to make sure that we're understanding what someone is saying. And there's a great communication exercise where, that they call it whisper down the lane, where you start something at the first person and you have everybody communicate it. And by the time it gets down to the last person, it's nothing like what was originally communicated at the start. And so it's important as part of relationships and as part of nurturing that we have understanding. If I'm saying X, Y, I need you to understand X, Y, not think I'm saying X1. And so sometimes it may be necessary until we begin to understand one another and grow in our relationship that sometimes I might have to say, okay, I've said something. What do you believe I'm communicating to you? And that becomes the heart of communication, not simply me saying something, but making certain that what I'm saying is being heard and being understood. Doesn't necessarily mean you agree with it, but it means that you understand. You've heard me, you've acknowledged what I've said, I've heard you, and I've acknowledged what you've said. And from that common understanding, then we can discuss and talk from there. But if I'm saying X and all you're hearing is Y, there's no understanding. We're not going to be able to effectively communicate with one another. And as a result, there will be no nurturing because there's no understanding. So how are you developing understanding in your relationships? Are you taking the time to make sure that what you're saying is being both heard and understood? And also, are you taking the responsibility to make sure that you hear and understand what someone else is saying? Having a level of understanding greatly impacts our relationships, and it makes them far more effective than they could ever be. And so part of your nurture is to make sure that you're getting understanding. The R, resilience. We're nourishing unconditional relationships with tenacity, understanding, resilience, and empathy. Resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. You know, it's a skill. It's a skill. We may have some inherent ability to do it, but ultimately it's a skill that is developed over time from lessons learned. And so when we think about resilience, you know, we all have setbacks. We can't avoid them. But when you have a setback, what do? You have to step back and you've got to get ready for your comeback. Something's going to knock us down. Something's going to knock us out. Something's always going to come and be a shocking blow, but we can't stay there. What are you going to do when shocking circumstances and situations come your way? They can't overtake you. They may in that moment. Let's not excuse that they don't hit us and that we're, untouchable in that regard. No, pain hurts, grief hurts, but what are we going to do after it? That resilience is what we have to rely on, what we have to pull on to be able to recover quickly from difficulties. And quickly is relative, right? You know, everyone may have a different timeline and time scale in which they do that. But the point is that you're on the journey to recover. You don't just stay in the place of the difficulty. We have to recover. The second book I wrote was The Journey from Grief to Growth. I've experienced tremendous grief in my life, and that's a whole nother lesson for a whole nother time. But with each grief experience, I've been on a journey to grow from it. I don't want to just go through it or go through it. I want to grow through it. And growth is something that is intentional. It's not accidental. We have to be intentional and purposeful about our growth. And so this resilience muscle that we build comes from how we respond to those difficulties. Are we going to rise? I think I had done a luncheon. It wasn't a lunch and learn. I think it was a speech I had given a few years ago about rising through difficulties. And that was an acronym yet again, we're R. We have to remember who we are. So important that we don't lose sight of who we are and who is on the inside of us and the strength that we have internally. And then we have to take an inventory of all of our gifts, our talents, and our abilities so that we can understand, yes, this is who I am and what do I have? What can I do? When we take that inventory of our gifts, talents, and abilities. And then S, we have to strategize. Yeah, I have gift, talents, and ability X, Y, and Z, but how do I use that? How do I strategize and use that in my life to help me with these difficulties, to help me to get on this journey and to grow through these things and not just simply go through them? So I'm remembering who I am. I'm taking the inventory of the gifts, talents, and abilities. I'm strategizing on how I'm using them. And then E, I'm bringing the necessary energy to energize myself to apply. So I'm energizing and I'm evaluating. I'm energizing myself to apply myself to do this, but I'm also evaluating where I am. And that's a very cyclical nurture, a cyclical experience. It goes on and on and on. I remember who I am. I take the inventory of the gifts, talents, and abilities. I strategize on how I'm going to use those gifts, talents, abilities. I bring my full energy and I evaluate where I am. Because guess what? As I'm evaluating, as I'm using energy and I'm evaluating, I'm changing, I'm growing. So now I've got to go back and remember who I am again. Because who I was before I went through it is not who I am now. I've been changed. Something about me changed. I may have lost some things. I may have gained some things. So now I've got to remember who I am all over again. Take the inventory of the gifts, talents, and abilities. Maybe after I went through this difficulty, I learned a new skill. And now that comes into my inventory bucket. So then now strategizing, how am I going to use that? Bring my full energy, bring my whole evaluation process. And it's constantly on and on. That is how we build that resilience muscle through that resistance and through that ongoing process of rising, remembering who we are, taking inventory of our gifts, talents, and abilities, strategizing on how we're going to use those gifts, talents, and abilities, and then bringing our necessary energy and evaluation to the process. ongoing over and over again. So, how are you doing this? How are you nurturing yourself through this resilience process? How are you nurturing others? When we think about our moms, like, like I know as a boy mom, I'll share this. My kids, like, boys, they roughhouse and they get hurt and they do different things. And I was of the persuasion, like, listen, if I don't see bones sticking out and blood running all over the place, you all right? Suck it up, buttercup. I would tell them, I had to be kind of tough with the boys, like we're not going to fall out. Let's see what it is. What's going on? Let's bandage it up. Let's get the peroxide. Let's do what we have to do. Yeah, but okay, we got to cut. Okay, you're alive. Did you live? Let's just keep things in perspective. Yes, things happen. And I'm sorry that you hurt yourself. I'm sorry that you got injured, but you're still alive. We got to make sure we keep proper perspective and then have the resilience. Let's get back up. How do you ride a bike? If you stop the first time you fell off of that bike and never got back up and tried it again, you would never be riding the bike. And so the difficulties and the challenges, they come, but the resilience factor impacts how we are going to recover from them. And that's what helps us to then nurture. So moms do that. That's a function of motherhood, being able to nurture and to do that. And so think about that in your relationships. Think about how you're recovering. Think about how you're helping others to recover, right? When you see someone that's maybe downtrodden and they're falling apart and they're not really moving or growing through a circumstance or situation, how can you lovingly encourage them unconditionally with love, right? How can you be nourishing and understanding and unconditional and in that relationship and help them to grow in their tenacity? Like it's all a part of it. It's all connected, this whole nurture sequence and what we need to do. Lastly, empathy. E is for empathy. And what exactly is empathy? It's the ability to sense the emotions and feelings of another and to respond accordingly. The old adage, put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and so you might not have experienced what they're experiencing. And so you may have to work a little bit harder to be empathetic, but you've experienced perhaps something similar. You never discount, what someone is going through or tell them, oh, I know what you're feeling, because you don't. Even if you have had a similar experience. That's one of the worst things. Part of what I coach a lot is around grief, because I've been through numerous grief experiences. Every grief experience is different. And one of the worst things you can say to someone who's grieving is, oh, I know what you're going through. No, you really don't. You may have lost your mom too, or you may have lost your husband too, but you don't know what I'm going through. My experience is not the same as your experience. And so it's important as we're being empaths and showing empathy towards others, that we use the right language as well, and that we don't disenfranchise people with what it is that we're saying. I can relate to what you're going through because I experienced something similar, but I know your experience, is uniquely for you, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, and I want to support you. Like it's just a small tweak in how we say things can really make a huge difference with us being empathetic towards others. And so it is important that, we consider, I'll share a story in my motherhood. Like I said earlier, my husband passed away in November of 2021. And at the time, my youngest son had just turned 16. He turned 16 on November 20th, and my husband passed away on November 24th. And so, he really didn't get to see my son driving and, doing all those wonderful things that, my son would have loved, for his dad to be a part of. And so now here it is, it's 2024, and my 16-year-old son is now going to be graduating from high school. And so we were making some plans, for his graduation party. And I'm like, okay, let's, get a venue, let's do this. And he's like, no, I want to have it here at the house. And I'm just like, oh no, like we have a large family and we have a pretty large network of friends. And so I'm like, oh no, let's get a venue. I'm trying to be like, I don't know if I want these people at my house. That might be a lot, And so I'm planning to, and I'm pushing him towards getting a venue. And he just kept saying, no, I want it here at the house. And so I began to, I guess, be a little more tenacious and started pushing a little more aggressively. And so then finally he said to me, Mom, he's like, I really want to have a graduation party here at the house because Dad's presence is here. that hit me really hard because at that moment, I realized I wasn't really being really empathetic for his plight and what he might have been thinking in that moment as it related to his graduation. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. I had totally missed that. And I looked at him and I said, absolutely, son, we'll have the graduation party here, at the house. And so that was one time when I needed to listen. I needed to pay attention to what my child was feeling. I needed to have the necessary empathy for him, right? And I needed to really create some understanding for him and really be unconditional. Like, I'm not going to put my conditions like, I'm doing this, no, I really needed to understand him. And I did that in that moment, and it really made a difference. So y'all pray for me with this graduation party and this list, but we're going to get through it. But it's important. How are we bringing empathy towards our relationships? Are we really placing ourselves in the shoes of someone else and really trying to see things more from their perspective? Because remember, the world is framed by your perception. For real, for real. Your worlds are framed by your perception. Doesn't mean that that's the real world. The real world is the real world, but the way you see things is your world and your frame. And so we have to realize sometimes that people are seeing things differently than what the real world is. And so we have to be empathetic towards that and put ourselves in their shoes so that we can hit that understanding. And then from that understanding, perhaps there can come some nourishing that can come, right? And there can be some unconditional perspectives in your relationship. And then you can probably help them to see a different perspective. And then they can understand you, you can understand them, but it's somebody wants to be the one that's willing to get in the booth and to have the conversation and to be willing to see it from someone else's perspective first before you see it from your own. Then you can share perspectives. But if it's like, oh, my way, your way, those two parallel lines never cross. Come on, take us back to our geometry class. Two parallel lines never cross, but perpendicular lines will intersect. And it's in that intersection, your part, my part, that intersection and that common union creates the opportunity for us to grow together. So nurture, nourishing unconditional relationships with tenacity, understanding, resilience, and empathy. I hope something I've said has shifted your energy, awakened your potential, and hopefully added value to your life and given you something to think about. That's the whole purpose of Lunch and Learn, an opportunity for me to share a concept with you. Hopefully, you're learning something and we can have a dialogue either through the comments or we can always connect. And so I say that as a resource. I want you to stay in touch with me. Please join my VIP mailing list. You can either scan the QR code that is here, or you can go on the web and put in the website bit.ly / all capitals, connect with Coach Paula. And then you'll be able to give me your contact information. I can put you on my VIP mailing list. Or if you're interested in booking a free discovery call and you want to talk about this some more, perhaps enter into some type of coaching agreement, that would be great. You can scan the QR code here to my right, which will give you the opportunity to schedule a free discovery call on my calendar. Again, the webpage is bit.ly / free intro call in all caps. I would love to continue the conversation and to help you in your process of growth, in your process of nurture, in whatever processes that you may have. I'd love to partner with you and to share. And so as we close, my request for you today is to give me feedback. That's how I grow. And so that reciprocity, hopefully I've given you something in return. I'd love if you could give me something in return and give me feedback on this speech. If it was something that you thought was helpful or something that you found insightful, I'd love to get your feedback. You can scan the QR code there or and use the code TALK, TALK, or you can go to the webpage bit.ly / PHEVAL FORM. So PH for my name, Paula's, eval, and form. So I really appreciate your feedback. It will not hurt my feelings. Be as blunt and as honest as is possible, because that helps me to grow and that helps to nurture me. And I would greatly appreciate that. Our next Lunch and Learn session will be the first Friday of June. Remember, we do the first Friday of every month at 12 noon. And for the month of June, we're going to talk about bridging transitions, the power of structure in crossing to success. And I think we'll do a little bit of an ode to fatherhood and as well. I just realized that it is Fatherhood Month. So fathers, they bring structure. And so I think I will tie into that lesson on bridging transitions and the power of structure and talk about fathers as being foundation and as being structure for the family. I think I'll hit on that as well. So I'll make a mental note to myself in planning that. So yet again, I appreciate your attendance. I appreciate your feedback. Like I said, I hope something that I've said has shifted your energy, awakened your potential, and given you something to think about and added value to your life. Thank you for joining. I hope that you have a great day. Honor your mother this month. Honor motherhood. Honor the function of motherhood. Those women that have poured into your life, make sure you honor them, not just in the month of May, okay? Make sure you honor them at all times, but especially during this time. Whether that's a card, whether that's a gift, a nice meal, whatever it is, trust me, the mothers, the motherhood providers in your life will greatly appreciate any level of recognition that you will give them. So that's your homework. That's your homework from this session, to make sure that you honor motherhood. Make sure that you nurture as a function of motherhood, and that you don't just honor the function of motherhood, but that you yourself begin to nurture others. So thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.